Here, Russia's warning after Macron said Western
President
troops in Ukraine cannot be
Emmanuel
ruled
Macron
out.
has come under fire for suggesting the West might deploy troops to Ukraine. But despite that backlash, the Elysee isn't backing down. A palace source says Ukraine's allies must debate the issue. The source says there are all kinds of things ruled out 2 years ago that are no longer ruled out, and that France fears giving credence to the possibility that Russia can win. All this after Mr. Macron's comments, if you remember, on Monday. And to be clear, the French president didn't actually say he wanted to send troops to Ukraine.
Like with Caesar, is this investigation politically motivated? Yes. Is he guilty? Also, yes. Yeah, except the investigation isn't into Hunter Biden. It's into Joe Biden. Like, if they were conducting an impeachment inquiry into Hunter Biden, then yeah, great. But we are not the Better Business Bureau for the nation state of Ukraine, demanding legal recourse from Hunter Biden for lying to Burisma about having insider access to the fucking White House. This is the American government. Like, that's the whole point. You can't really impeach an unelected, not official person. French first, World War II, then Vietnam, time for a new war.
He only said it's being discussed with other leaders. Here's what he told reporters after Ukraine aid summit.
There's no consensus today to officially send, support, and to take responsibility for troops on the ground. But as things develop, nothing should be off the table. We will do everything necessary so that Russia cannot win this war.
While most European leaders agree on
Good luck.
board with the part about defeating Russia, but the idea of sending in their own troops, well, that drew backlash. Officials from a growing list of countries, you can see there, including the UK, Germany, Spain, Italy, Slovakia, and Poland, all say they have no plans to send their forces to Ukraine. A NATO official tells...
Bro, when you're lapping the polls on fucking sending troops to Ukraine, like, even Poland is like, I don't know about that, dog. Yo, chill. Like, I would have expected this from Poland, not from Macron. The tables have turned. Hasan, do you not hope Russia loses, though? I do. I want Russia to leave Ukraine. Now, what do I think will happen if there is French militarization, a NATO nation directly sending troops to Ukraine officially? Well, you want Ukraine to leave Ukraine? What? That doesn't even make sense. France is doing this partially because they have nukes. Yeah, but like that doesn't change anything. Like it's basically the same principles behind like not instituting Article 5 or something for Ukraine, or not having a no-fly zone over Ukraine that is protected by NATO forces.
CNN, the alliance won't be deploying combat troops either. And the Kremlin has also responded following Mr. Macron's comments. A spokesperson says conflict with Russia is inevitable if the West sends troops
Could they use troops to provide support? I mean, they have been already.
To Ukraine. And we've just seen in the last few minutes, in fact, that the State Department...
Wait, what did Russia say? Hold on.
...also responded following Mr. Macron's comments. A spokesperson says conflict with Russia is inevitable if the West sends troops to Ukraine. And we've just...
Keep going, Hasan. What consequences are there for sending NATO troops? Wait, what? Onto the front? What do you mean? What do you think the consequences are? It's the same consequences behind not instituting a no-fly zone. It's like a potential for nuclear holocaust. Mutually assured destruction. It's two nuclear powers going to war with one another in active conflict. It's also, I suspect, a deeply unpopular position in France. I don't know what the actual numbers look like, but I would assume that it's probably not very popular.
Seen in the last few minutes, in fact, that the State Department has also commented on this. The State Department reiterating that President Biden has ruled out sending US troops to fight in Ukraine in response to Macron's comments, saying sending Western troops to Ukraine cannot, obviously what Macron heard, cannot be ruled out. So we have response now from the US State Department. Melissa Bell joins me now for more. And Melissa, I mean, it's clear that, as we've just outlined there, the European leaders have been pretty swift in their response to Macron's comments. Before we talk about...
I don't understand why they're like, we'll send troops to Ukraine and potentially trigger like mutually assured destruction. But like, they could have sent more fucking weapons earlier on. Like, how are both of these positions being argued at the same time? Like, I don't really get it. They're like, yeah, okay, well, things didn't work out, so now we're just going to fucking maybe tank the nuclear fallout? Okay.
How they're responding individually. Just frame for us what Macron said and how it's being received at home.
Well, essentially, what he had to announce in his press conference, and this was, Issa, in response to a question that was asked about whether this issue had been raised and debated over the course of the conference that was held here.
Like that, by the way, they could have sent more modern weapons early on if they wanted to help Ukraine win for real instead of just LARPing. They would have done so by now. NATO, fake-ass friend. I think, like, even then, it's not a 100% certainty that Ukraine would have won or successfully mounted an opposition to the Russian invasion. It certainly would have been better. They would have had more leverage. They would have had significantly more leverage as a consequence of putting up or mounting up a better defense in general. Americans don't want French soldiers in Ukraine, yeah? So how about sending U.S. and fucking artillery ammunition so the Ukrainians stop fucking dying? Macron is just memeing to take over the narrative of Germany being the EU leader. Just at the moment when Schultz faced criticism for not sending Taurus missiles and other shit, it's not a serious comment. Don't treat it as such. I don't think it's a serious comment either. I do think it's... I don't think it's a serious comment. I think it's either a misspeak or... he's posturing for, I guess, like domestic political purposes.
Paris. Yes, it had, he said, because it was time that a debate began. The idea is that this should be the beginning of a debate about whether any individual countries, and we've been speaking to Élysée sources since some of that backlash that you mentioned. And what Emmanuel Macron is suggesting is not that France should encourage Germany or Poland or other countries who've now said they will not be sending troops to Ukraine to do so. On the contrary, that individual countries should be considering whether or not they are willing to send perhaps not so much initially combat troops, but things like deminers, people to help with the maintenance of Western equipment, border guards, for instance, to help liberate some Ukrainian troops that they can be redeployed for combat. That is the initial suggestion that was behind Emmanuel Macron's comments. And I think it's important to note that there have been words of support. For instance, Lithuania's foreign minister has said that it is time to consider all the options that there may be amongst Western allies about what may come next. The idea is that 2 years into this war, and with things stagnating as much as they are, that Western allies should be willing to consider individually whether or not they want to get further involved. And I think what the Élysée sources have been saying is that this is important.
The real scary thing for Ukraine would be if they started like threatening to deport Ukrainian men back to Ukraine so they can be conscripted.
Important from the point of view of sending a signal to Moscow of strategic ambiguity, that nothing should be off the table in order that Moscow should not assume that what has been will continue to be. And essentially, as you mentioned, Macron's point is that there have been so many issues that have been off the table so far, things that have now been agreed to, F-16s, the sending of long-range missiles, and the sending of troops should be amongst that, Isa.
But the way he framed that line that we heard there sounded like that wasn't discussed at this summit, and at least from what we've heard as well, the kind of pushback we've heard from some European leaders. Was this even discussed at all? He says it's time it's discussed. Was it even discussed?
I'm French, the country, Le Pen. In the country, Le Pen has a strong pro-Putin image, so I think Macron, who really looks like her right now, wants to have more posture as a different guys from the far right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's a distraction. It's a distraction to shift the message away from his horrible tax policies and things like that, or his horrible policies like implemented, like increasing the retirement age, shit like that. The French PM also called Marine Le Pen a Russian Putin soldier to her face today on the parliament. I think the funniest part about these people that like supposedly posture as pro-Putin is that they absolutely are not. Like, the greatest example of this is Meloni. Well, in Italy, it's a little bit different because, like, the Italian fascist far right post World War II directly was a NATO project. So, like, even though she postured a little bit as though she was like anti NATO or pro Putin for populism, they're not going to do that. Le Pen's party received a massive amount of money from Russia. I think if she came to power, she would not be. They are. Le Pen got money from a Russian bank. Let me just Google it. No, guys, I think you're not understanding what I'm saying. I'm not stating that these people aren't like genuinely posturing for pro-Putin, as though they're pro-Putin. I'm stating that when they do come into power, they will play along with NATO. They're fascists. They're right-wing, populist, fascist losers. What about Orban? Orban is a phenomenal example of this. Orban acts like he's anti-EU and anti-NATO, and Orban, or Hungary as a nation, wouldn't exist without a shit ton of EU subsidies. And Orban, as of today, has literally fallen in line with the NATO position. So a lot of that posturing is a way to try and leverage between better contracts with better contracts from Russia, or maybe even utilizing the anti-Ukraine sentiment or pro-Putin sentiment that might exist to tap into a certain audience, to tap into a certain part of the voter base. But ultimately, it doesn't really, it doesn't matter. There's no real momentum there because you would be shut out from the Western world. And if you are a part of the Western sphere of influence, Russia's not going to fucking save you.
Gust.
We've understood that it began to be raised during this conference, but of course there will be a question for individual countries. For instance, France is about to begin debating in its parliament how it goes forward with this war, what it's...
I love liberals, dude. Liberals are like, Macron is a lesser evil between the two. Brother, dude, this man is so categorically positioned to just like do lesser evil voting that he's talking about lesser evil voting in an election that Macron is not even running in, okay? In a country where there are other fucking parties. I love that. It's like, what do you mean, dude? He's like, no, listen, dude, I don't know what the fuck's going on in France. I just like saying that one party is the lesser evil. He's just, that's the love of the game, brother. That's the love of the game in me speaking. Yeah. Macron won't be in any election anymore. Well, there's the EU elections, but he doesn't have much. Chad was describing the difference between Le Pen and Macron. Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but there are other parties in France. Very popular ones, as a matter of fact. Look at what you did, Hasan. What the fuck?
Put him right in through here.
Yep.
So have you ever met this guy?
No.
Just asked him to come back here.
We were just standing outside, so.
Yeah, I
thought he
usually
was
live
fine.
on the side of the street. Occasionally I come in and hopefully they try to give me a little bit of, try to get a free sandwich, something like that.
I thought he might
Soup.
need a job, so.
Yeah. It's a cold day, so sometimes they'll feel sorry for me. Naturally.
I do love seeing Twitch streamers do like regular, real jobs.
Nice.
This is a fire meta.
Yep.
Yeah, let's get this one loaded up. And what you can do is do one row of the wood trays, and then I'll have you just put in some of the utensils in there.
Okay. Oh, on like the other side?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we'll load these in the other side too. These don't need to be rinsed too much.
Okay.
Just throw them on the other side. Really? All right. We're almost done with the first. We're almost done with the first load.
Yeah.
Clean.
This is the most washing this man has ever done. This is one of those things you definitely would get your ass ate over if you did. Yeah, they'd be like, he's LARPing as a worker. Fuck this guy. Fucking piece of shit. Blah, 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 blah. See, look. Yeah, it's cool when rich streamers mock us low-income scum by taking over jobs so they can have fun. Oh my God. I haven't even done it and motherfuckers are doing it already. Jesus Christ, dude.
Consequences are for France, and we understand that this may be a part of the future discussions. The suggestion was that debate began about this issue, and this should now be a debate and a consideration for individual countries. Not that NATO or the European Union should send troops in, but that individual allies may now consider something that until now had been something of a red line. And I think the response from Moscow, the very strong response, that this was would inevitably lead to a confrontation between NATO and Russia, is an indication from the point of view of the Elysee that that message has been heard, that everything is possible and that they need to be paying attention, Isa.
Very important context there from our Melissa Bell in Paris. Great to have you on, Melissa. Thank you very much. Let's get more analysis on this. I'm joined now by Reem Montas. She's a research fellow for European foreign policy and security at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. Reem, welcome back to the show. You would have heard there Melissa Bell talking about this in detail, but you would have seen, Reem, the European leaders being kind of very swift, very quick as well, and tough on their response, themselves really trying to distance themselves, just to say, from Macron. What do you make, first of all, Reem, of how Macron framed it here?
So unlike his usual way of talking, Macron was pretty prudent in the way he answered the question. What had happened is that before this conference that he had organized with about 20 heads of state and government, mainly from Europe, to look at how European countries can do more to support Ukraine in its fight for survival, the Slovak prime minister had raised this issue of possibly sending Western troops to Ukraine. He had not talked about Western troops engaging in any kind of frontline combat, of course, against Russian troops. And so at the presser, Emmanuel Macron was asked to comment on that statement by the Slovak prime minister. And he basically said this had come up during their conversations and their discussions during that conference, and that nothing could be ruled out, and that the main message should be to send to Russia is that the Europeans are going to do everything that is necessary in order to ensure that Russia doesn't win. So he was quite non-committal, because Go ahead, Isa. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I mean, that is a message that we have been hearing, that there has been, it does seem to be a shift, at least in tone, Reem. I mean, I don't know if you heard Melissa saying that, for Elysée Palace source telling CNN, the question of Kiev's allies sending troops to Ukraine is, quote, a debate that we must have. So clearly not backing down at all. But we have heard in the last, well, few hours, I should say, support also, Reem, from some allies. Well, a friend of the show here, the Lithuanian foreign minister, who said, I'm going to bring it up, Europe's fate is being decided on the battlefields of Ukraine. Times like these require political leadership, ambition and courage to think out of the box. The initiative behind the Paris meeting yesterday is well worth considering. So not complete, I mean, some believing, like Landsbergis, this might be the moment to start talking about it.
To be honest, some aspects of this idea have been discussed among allies for the past couple of weeks in various fora, not necessarily at the highest levels, but there have been some testing grounds to see who might be willing to do this and what they might be willing to do. Of course, everyone has in mind that they don't want to lead to any kind of escalation, any kind of direct combat, any kind of direct contact between Western military and Russian military. So that is front of mind. They're also looking at the rules of engagement. If they send in trainers, for example, to train Russian troops, which, by the way,
That's never happened before. That's a great idea. Sending trainers? Oh, man. That was another war that I remember that the French were involved in, that America did that. I can't put my finger on it. What was that thing that the French were doing and then America was involved and they would send trainers over and then... Oh, that's right. That's exactly what happened in Vietnam.
they have been doing in Poland, they have been doing in the UK, they have been doing in Germany. If they decide to move that training, say, to the western side of Ukraine, parts closer to the Polish border, does that really change things? And how can they do it in a way that is safe and that does not escalate the situation with Russia? Very serious people are looking at this. They're also looking at doing, as Melissa had said, any kind of support with demining and other such activities.